Welcome back to the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation podcast. Today, we're excited to delve into the fascinating world of digital transformation and its promising ability to revolutionize public service delivery across Africa. My name is Ofovwe Aig-Imoukhuede, co-founder and executive vice chair at the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation. And with me today is Aigboje Aig-Imoukhuede, chairman and founder of the foundation. We will be co-hosting this podcast.
Welcome. As you know, at the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation, a critical driver of our mission is building a high-performance public sector that serves its citizens better. Fundamental to this is the use of technology and digital infrastructure as strong tools for achieving large-scale transformation in good public service delivery. This podcast will facilitate a discussion to uncover our country, Nigeria's journey to achieving digital transformation, as well as the plans the government is being put in place to ensure that Nigerians experience its benefits. Joining us for this insightful conversation is a true leader in the digital space, Dr. Bosun Tijani, the Honourable Minister for Communications.
Dr. Bosun Tijani is the Honourable Minister of Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He's the co-founder and former CEO of Co-Creation Hub, CC Hub. Under his leadership, CC Hub became a vital catalyst for the African tech ecosystem, promoting collaboration, knowledge sharing, and the development of groundbreaking solutions to local and global challenges. Prior to CC Hub, he led the networking and coordination of innovation agencies across Europe as European Innovation Manager at PERA, and also previously worked at the International Trade Center in Geneva, Switzerland. Dr. Tijani, welcome to the podcast episode.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think it's fair to say that on the journey to achieving public sector efficiency, a large section of Nigeria's public sector seems stuck on manual work processes, and this is at both federal and subnational levels. The familiarity, and dare I say perks, that manual work methods bring have held back a lot of public servants and consequently ministries from the possibilities that exist when technological solutions are adopted. There are, of course, some exceptions to this. The Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation, the OHCSF, the Lagos State Civil Service, the Edo State Civil Service, the Federal Ministry of Transport, the Nigerian Immigration Service, and a few others have adopted technology and digital infrastructure in some form and at varying levels to improve their work. However, so many others have not. But the world as we know it has fully moved away from manual and is entrenched in digital transformation. And I think many people now recognize that there is no longer any option but to move to digital. From your experience of both worlds, private and public sector, what would you say has kept the larger part of Nigeria's public service in the pre-digitalization stage?
Thank you for that question, which I think is probably a brilliant question to start with. And the answer is in the question itself as well, because you mentioned that there are a number of exceptions where we've seen great use of technology. And that's the answer to that question, in the sense that our approach to technology has been done in silos. So the way we conceive and actually deploy the use of technology in the Nigerian government is pretty much in silo. There's no clear whole of government approach. And sometimes when we say that, people may think this is about policy or initiatives that you've seen policies being used to push across government. But it's an actual deployment in itself. Because when you have different part of government deploying different set of technologies, you start to see disintegration. And the implication of that, whilst that's an approach to take, the implication of that is that you're not coming up with a whole of government approach to saying, these are the things that we need to use technology to deliver. And as such, this is what all the MDAs will do with technology. Because at the end of the day, the business of government is in serving its people. That's the sole business of government. And the application of technology should allow government to serve the people. There's no other motive for using technology. Of course, we can talk about technology making processes a lot more faster, seamless, cost-effective. But at the end of the day, you're doing all those things to ensure that you can meet the needs of your people. So because we've actually made progress as a nation. We've made progress. If you look at the way we use technology, there's been extensive application of technology. The examples that you mentioned, we've seen what we've done with the TSA, for instance, can also be described as a good use of technology. We've seen what we've done with identity in the country. It's also a fantastic example. I think in the interbank settlement system is probably one of the top examples that we should be talking about as well. But as great as they are, these things are not connected. And until we connect them, government will not be able to take advantage of it. If the president in his office cannot see what is happening across board, how many children were given birth to, last week or even yesterday, or, how many people are in the prisons, how many students do we have in tertiary institution, how many people came into the country. It'll be difficult as a government to actually be able to make gains of this. And if you cannot demonstrate return on investment, you can't also demonstrate continued investment that needs to go into appropriating technology. And once you can't do that, you can't have optimal security systems for the solutions you buy. You're probably not buying the best solutions in the first place because you're not negotiating as a whole organization. You're negotiating in silos, which means that you don't have the hedge that you need in negotiation. You probably don't have the best capabilities as well. We know that technology talent is in scarce supply and there's high demand for them. So government also, because we're doing it in silos, we don't have the ability to negotiate and bring the best people to actually support technology development. So for me, I think this is the biggest barrier to optimally using technology in Nigerian government today.
Thank you, Dr. Tijani. A number of the factors you've spoken about are things that at the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation we're trying to solve for ourselves, working with government, of course. And you have stressed the issue of skills and capacity. It's therefore not strange to find that many of our initiatives are targeted at building digital skills, building capacity, either in terms of the human ability to do things or the capacity in terms of available resources for humans to man. One of the key things that we've observed is the need to change the culture of the staff in the public service. Because at the end of the day, however good the technology is, if we don't have the people to man the processes and so on, then we haven't built a system. During our courtesy visit to your office a few weeks ago, you spoke passionately about your plans to create Nigeria's version of what India has done, what Estonia has done. Our version of what India has done with the national ID system, which they call Aadhaar, would be very important in the sense that India, of course, has enrolled over 1.3 billion citizens onto this system, which has now given them the foundation of what they call the India stack. And they're using digital infrastructure to solve India's hard problems, including paperless and cashless service delivery. We are keen to hear from you how you intend to cause a similar type of revolution around digital infrastructure in Nigeria.
A lot of work has been done on digital ID, which I believe is a strong foundation for you to be able to put technology to effective use. The NIN number, which of course can be a lot more stronger, is already on a very strong path to allowing us to be able to do what we want to do with digitalization in the country. 90% of adults have been registered. So there's opportunity to leverage that. I spoke earlier about the interbank settlement system as well. Payment is at the core of how services generally, whether in the public or private sector, are provided. We already also have a strong interbank settlement system in the country. I think the only thing we lack at the minute is a data exchange system. And the moment you have a data exchange system, which means the solutions we're building in silos can now speak to one another, which means MDAs can share data across a board and within government, we would then be in a position to be able to build a Nigerian stack, because the stack is really a combination of ID, payment, but also the ability for people to be able to data interoperability, whether for government agencies to be able to access data, be able to check ID, but also be able to initiate payment, or even a private company as well. So the way we're imagining the Nigerian stack, that this is going to be a set of APIs, but also a set of technologies and principles that will drive how we use digital technologies to provide critical services to our people. And these critical services will not just be limited to government services. When you have a strong government stack, it's also the foundation for the private sector, because the private sector wants to be able to ID their customers. And the best source of ID for citizens is through government. The private sector wants to be able to securely make payment within a trusted environment. Government has already done that, and government can provide foundation for that. You want to serve people within the education space. You want to be able to follow their education journey. So strong digital public infrastructure within education, within public health, will make it a lot easier for both government and private sector to serve. So this is what we consider to be the foundation. Being appointed as the minister, I think the country has made progress. We met a significant foundation on top of which we can build on. And if we don't take advantage of that, we actually see it as a disservice to the nation. So our goal is to ensure that we can build the capacity you talked about, Chairman. We understand that without capacity, you can't do this. Without the idea of saying that things are done in silos, it's not taking power away from MDAs. No, it's just saying we need a central way of developing standards and frameworks for how technology will be built across government. So whilst MDAs may still control their procurement process, but the demand is that process must go through a predefined set of standards, right? The vendors must go through a predefined set of standards. The solutions must be built to allow for data interoperability with other government systems. And what we've seen is that one of the ways to manage lack of capacity and skills is that we can have an elite team, which is a central team that is responsible for developing, but also managing that API. And that team doesn't have to sit within each MDA. This can be an elite team, which we can find ways to remunerate, because we understand that if we want to go by the civil service remuneration structure, we're not going to be able to compete to get the best people to work for government. But this has been done before. Even the example of India was supported by the private sector. Folks from within the private sector came together to help the country build what is now known as the Indian stack. And that was coming from the understanding that if you give a nation a stack, you're opening up the entire country to innovation. You're opening up the entire country to enhance an unprecedented productivity, which at the end of the day can only create collective prosperity, on top of which government can build on, but also citizens can have their needs met. So this is the approach we're taking. So we believe this approach can help us manage the skills shortage within government to be able to provide this service. We believe it's an approach that doesn't threaten powers and MDAs being able to still carry on what they want to carry. It just really support them to be able to deliver their work. And we also think it's inclusive, because it's not something that will be done by a single entity. Even if you have the elite team, they still have to work with the whole of government, but also the private sector as well.
Dr. Tijani, as you speak, our experiences at the foundation are very consistent with the things you say. The Executive Vice Chair, Mrs. Aig-Imoukhuede, and her team work very closely with civil servants, from the most senior to the most junior, in a bid to build capacity. But at the same time, they actually handhold and, in a sense, sometimes let public servants sit on their shoulders when it comes to implementing some of the types of things you are talking about. Maybe she will share with us in this conversation her experiences and the ways that they've been able to build the trust of the civil servant to work in the way you are speaking about.
Yes, thank you very much. I was very interested, Dr. Tijani, in your suggestion that you would have an elite group of, I don't know what they would be. Would they also be public servants who would go from ministry to ministry and department to department to sort of facilitate this digitalization process? I think for sustainability's sake, it's very, very important that the civil servants themselves are part of the process and are carried along. My fear is that if you sort of try to do it without their deep involvement, your project will not have the results that you expect. We take an approach, as the chairman said, of working hand in hand with the civil servants. building their capacity as we go along to ensure that they have a level of ownership of the project. Because without that ownership, without the belief in the system and their ability to interact with it, it will be very hard at the end of the day, once your elite team leaves, for them to continue through with the process. So I think that your idea is excellent. Yes, at this point, we don't have the capacity in the civil service to actually implement this, but your team should have a dual mandate of implementing the system, but also building the capacity, identifying people within each MDA, because there are excellent public servants, excellent civil servants. Identify people who they will train, who they will sort of bring on board, find out what it is that they need to get them to buy into that system and train them, because you will find ultimately that that's the only way that you will achieve a sustainable system. It's excellent. It's brilliant. The technology obviously is going to have an amazing impact on the lives of Nigerian citizens. But as the chairman said, culture is key. And you can have this elite group of your public servants going from place to place, putting excellent things in place, leaving, and then it's sabotaged at the end of the day. So I think that this is something that you need to build into your model. Yeah,
so I think the elite team is not, I didn't mention that it will go from place to place. The elite team is an engineering team that builds APIs and standards and documentation. And you need technologies, core technologies to build that. And you have to bring in the best people from anywhere you find them, whether in the public sector or private sector. The same thing was done in India, where you have folks from Infosys and the likes actually coming together to help build the Indian stack. And the documentation is an essential part of stack. What you then do is exactly what you've described, which is transferring the knowledge. And this is what we've already started doing with devs in government. That's the sole purpose of creating a platform called Devs in Government, which is a monthly meetup and a platform through which we train the technologies in government. I'm sure you follow what we do. We're currently working with data.org, where we're actually training them on responsible data management. We're moving away from that. The next thing we're doing for the next edition is actually focus on building standards, web design standard for government. This is a practice that you find in some of the best countries in the world, where you have a design standard, and the design standard is extremely focused on empowering. It's not on dictating. Where the design standard are built, you have a wiki, which is a website where any MDA can go to. They can download all the principles, the fonts, up to font colors. In some cases, they can literally almost download the website. And that platform also then will have people who train their implementers. So implementers will be their contractors that they will then be trained. So I think we're probably describing the same thing. The Nigerian stack is not, when I say elite team, the elite team we can't have a team that goes around all MDAs. What they will build is a strong system, strong set of principles. They will then start to train people, and that's why the Devs in Government has been created to mitigate against what you've described. And I think, to be honest, that's actually the biggest challenge. What you're describing is the biggest challenge to any change. Culture is the biggest challenge. If we have to do a Nigerian stack today, I say to people, we may actually be. I don't think we were where India was when they were starting their process. Because when they talk about ADA, when they talk about what they've been able to do with UPI, I think we have all the technologies in place in the country already. NIBS is extremely solid to allow Nigeria to build our own ADA easily. I think it's something that can be done in a matter of months based on what we have with NIBS. If we strengthen the security further on NIN, I think that also automatically put us where India is with their UPI and ADA. And so it's the culture. Once we sort out data exchanges, the culture, how do we ensure that people don't see this as a threat to their individual work within their MDAs? And that's the way we're approaching it. That's how we're building it.
Honourable Minister and EVC, this conversation excites me because it basically, for those who are participating, who are listening to this podcast, it's conversations like this that bring up the initiatives that are required to make transformative change happen, whether in India or in Nigeria. And, as we speak, already I begin to see that the great work you are doing with bringing software development, application development, and standards into the heart and the mainframe of how the public service works, we must do that. But then let's start thinking about some things. This is throwing up certain things in my mind. And Ofovwe, you'll know what I'm talking about. In the sense that if we look at the civil service and public service rules, if we look at their capacity building curriculums, and if we think also about the pathways to career progression, if we hard code software development and things like this into the system, right, it will begin to make that change. So I'm not even too sure whether the system recognizes software development as a career path, recognizes, this type of digital specialist as a career requirement, So we have career paths for people in health, people in other areas. And now the most critical area for us, which is technology, we have to create that career path in the public service, whereby, digital natives and technologists they feel included, they feel they have a space, and that their work will be recognized and rewarded within the service. The other thing, of course, is, so Nigeria has embarked on this project, which you are leading, to put and basically harness and couple all the investments we've made around digital infrastructure to support this common whole of government system. Our foundation has recently announced our commitment, and it's a significant commitment, along with Access Bank, over the next 10, 20 years to backing transformational initiatives like this. And the next steps for us, of course, would be, to take our conversation further, which we started when we paid you a courtesy visit, and enter into the necessary agreements as to how we come in and how we support your work. Well, of course, we aren't the only people. How do you think you will best bring the private sector to work with you and support your work, just in the same way as you have described took place in India?
Well, it's a fantastic question, and is really the next step in terms of the work that we need to do within the public sector to get this going. When you visited, I described a number of it. The declaration from the President of the Federal Republic is now being circulated amongst a few critical MDAs for them to give their no objection. Once that is done, the President will sign a declaration in place on digital public infrastructure, which is asking that we complete the loop by ensuring that we can put a data exchange system in place. And the focus of that declaration is on what we call live events, knowing that the role of government is to support citizens through live events, whether when you give birth to a child or when you get married, when you sign up to go to school, when you need to collect your passport, you need to go to the hospital, all the things that citizens must do. And by citizens here, we also mean businesses as well. All the things that individuals and businesses must do. In Nigeria, we would like to be able to synchronize our systems within government to be able to ease the experience for people so we can support them using technology. That's what that declaration is doing. The second thing we're doing in government that we're actually intentionally slowing it down is the Nigerian or the National Digital Economy and E-Governance Bill, which has gone through the first reading in both the Senate and the lower house. And the intention of the parliamentarians leading this was to find it fully passed by the end of July. We are actually encouraging them to slow down because we want to do extensive consultation We want this bill to be the first bill that will go to every state of the country. We want the private sector to have a say. That bill is going to be released publicly later today. And within that bill as well is going to be a lot of regulations to ensure that Nigeria as a country can actually push forward. And that bill will demand that in 12 months' time that there needs to be a plan for a whole of government e-government approach, which we'll then have to implement and work on. So for us to be able to achieve that, it comes back to what I've described, because there are different elements to these things. NIPS, for instance, is something that is done fantastically well. Chairman, you have a lot to say on this because it's from your industry. And the success of NIPS came from private organizations coming together to actually help shape what a good interbank settlement system should be for the industry. It's not about the government. Government may have regulatory oversight on how this is managed for the benefit of society, but the people who can truly help design it is the private sector. It's the same with NIN. We think there's still a lot more work that we need to do in bringing the private sector into how we improve the quality of a digital ID system in the country, a digital ID system that is not just for identifying people by government, but it's for identifying people for prosperity, that every activities that citizens will have to go through, that this digital ID system can help both businesses and government to identify them and offer these unique services to them. And the last bit, which is the most serious bit, is the data exchange system. As we talk about the data exchange system, the role is not just to build a data exchange system that government can use. We want to build a data exchange system that can empower, again, and enable prosperity in Nigeria. A data exchange system that allows companies to be able to interact with government data, for companies to be able to see data sets on Nigerian citizens and businesses when they need to deal with them. And we can't do all of these things alone without the private. And I think, to be honest, on this podcast, I like to make it a challenge for the foundation and my ministry that perhaps we're wasting time in signing our agreement, because I think there's a lot of commonalities in the way we look at this. The work that you've done within the public sector, helping to build capacity, is exactly the foundation. Before we started talking about DPI at all, we started that movement. We wanted to put focus on people. And that's still the way we're going about it, that we need to find ways to empower our people. To what you were saying about ensuring that the ICT cadre is properly treated, this is something that is on record that I've spoken about. It's my dream that before I leave government, that we can also have a system in place where that cadre is treated appropriately, that people who don't have the necessary background are not pushed to become an ICT director, that people can actually be recognized to go through, as you describe. If I'm a software engineer, I need to be able to go through that journey and progress through that journey in government. The system shouldn't push me away and send me to another career path that doesn't allow me to actually grow and add value. If I'm a DevOps engineer, that I can follow that path. There's a lot of work that we need to do in that space as well, and we can only do that work with the private sector. And the last thing I'll say on this, which also touches on skills, is that when we talk about capacity in government, we tend to focus only on civil servants. But the reality is that there's no MDA. Only a few. There are only a few MDAs where you see really talented people building solutions internally. Most of the technological solutions being built and used in government are done by private contractors. So our goal is also to create a community of private companies that we can actually train and build their capacity so that they understand the nitty-gritty and the details, the principles and the frameworks that the Nigerian stack will have in place, so that when they have to deploy solutions for any government agency, that they are doing so following those principles. Because if we build a principle and the private sector or the community of implementers don't have an understanding of it, government will still suffer because they're the ones who build for government. For the web design standard, for instance, we're actually seeing it as an opportunity to create a community of early stage young software developers, web developers, who can be trained to now become web implementers for government agencies. Because we know that most agencies won't do this work on their own. So this really is something that, at the nucleus of it is the work that government needs to do, is the regulations and everything. But the core work is in how much of the private sector can we pull together at different levels to be part of this journey, so that the nation will have the capacity to be able to put the Nigerian stack that we're hoping to build to effective use for the benefit of our people.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for that summary, Dr. Tijani. And on our end, I say that we are very keen to sign this MOU. As you said, we both share the same vision, and we're committed to this digitalization path that you're on. So in terms of all of the resources that you will need to actualize this dream, there's lots of interest. I'm sure there's lots of interest from external parties as well. So through what lens are you assessing the kind of partnership proposals that you would consider for this? You already talked about the important role that the local private sector has to play in this digitalization journey. So can you please talk about how you will be assessing potential partners and what sorts of incentives you will be providing for private sector players who might want to get engaged but are wary of the public sector for obvious reasons?
No, absolutely. I think the sort of partners we require and partnership that is required for a project of this sort is not just something that we can assess from funding only. I think this has to be much more than funding. We need to even first start from thinking of sustainability, but beyond sustainability, how do we ensure that if we're able to build this, that the legacy in itself is preserved, I think is important. And I think that's why your foundation is extremely important. You've been here, you've been doing this work for long. It is important to have foundations like yours in the loop, because we know that, after Dr. Tijani, the foundation will continue to be there. And by the grace of God, the foundation will continue to do this work. So that's one of the strategies that we can look at in terms of ensuring that we have partners who can bring that in. I think if we learn from India, again, just to clarify, we need to have that unit that has the best brains, that is beyond just the salary that government is paying, is beyond just the kind of people that you can attract from government. So we need, whether it's a DPI foundation for Nigeria, whatever foundation we're going to call it, that has an independent board. But government is also included in that board. And that board's role is to ensure that we continue to have that center of excellence. Technology is about excellence. We can't make the most of it if we're going to subject it to the current state of public service. That's the reality anywhere in the world. India had to do the same as well. The UK had to set up an elite team, a unit, that was responsible for driving the innovation and the growth they saw in the use of technology. I think this is common everywhere in the world. Estonia is almost commercialized their own unit that is responsible for Digital Estonia, where X-Road and the like sit. We went to Finland, is the same thing as well. So I think we need that unit, and we're also going to be looking at who are the partners that can help support that. In terms of funding, because without funding, you can't build a strong DPI system. You need the technologies. You have to be able to pay for them. So we also need to have those kind of people in place. And funding will be critical to pay for it, to do the implementation. And we have different kind of organizations who are also interested in being part of that. One other thing that we've done is we're also bringing the academia into this, because we understand that we need to continuously be studying how DPI is being done in Nigeria. And the academic space is where people can do PhD research, postdoc research, all sort of research projects focused on DPI, and they can help us document our learnings and ensure that these learnings are there for the future generation where we're not there to give our own insight. So documentation is extremely important in the process. For instance, the government through NIDA is sponsoring a few researchers to actually go to South Africa at the I think it's called IceGov event, which is almost the biggest one for e-government in Africa, to present some paper. And we ensure that we only sponsor those who are writing on e-government or DPI. So I think about 4 or 5 of them have been selected, and we're funding them to be able to go all the way to participate. So we also want to build that knowledge work within our academic institution. We want to get them involved in what's being done with government. In terms of partnership, as I mentioned earlier, we will need our parliamentarians as well. because the regulation side of this is important. If we don't have the laws backing it, we'll still come back to those silos that we're talking about. And people generally are scared of harmonizing things because they think they will lose power. But the reality is that the way this is being done, nobody is losing power. So I think that's what I can think of. And how do we build trust? We can build trust from the private sector by helping people to understand that, no, government doesn't, the elite team will not go from place to place deploying this. No, that's not their job. Their job is to create standard. The private sector will still be responsible for helping MDAs to build. So we're not killing their opportunities nor businesses. That's not the idea here. The elite team is just there to build the standard, build the APIs, document it effectively, so that when those private implementers are working with MDAs, they have the standard that they need to follow. So we will communicate that we want to create a community of private implementers, enlighten them, train them, empower them to be able to help deliver to our MDAs. And I think lastly, to what I've mentioned earlier, there must be an independent board, that is helping to steer the affairs of all these conversations. It's not something that a minister can just lead, because once this minister is out of the loop, who is there giving guidance and ensuring that this work is being done the way it should be done? I think that's the way we're at the minute looking at partnership. But of course, we're open to suggestions on things that we may not be thinking of that we should also take into consideration.
Honourable Mr. Dr. Tijani, you alluded to my experiences as a finance professional with NIBS. One of the catalysts for what we do in the foundation has indeed been our professional experiences. In fact, actually going before that, even our experiences as young people growing up in Nigeria, and in my case, the son of a child of civil servants. I've been privileged to be on the right side of history in many things. For instance, as you said, it was banking professionals in the then Money Market Association of Nigeria, which is now the Financial Market Dealers Association, FMDA, that came together and working with Central Bank built NIBS. I was part of that team. I remember Funke Oshibodu leading us, along with, I remember Jibril Aku, I think Bola Adeshola. I just remember this team of young banking professionals, and NIBS is the result you have today, working with Vincent Omoiki and the deputy governor in CBN then, was Oduyemi. Again, fast forward several years after, I'm a CEO of a bank. I'm working with the governor of the central bank in the bankers committee, and my colleagues as CEOs. We did the BVN, and you look at the other payment infrastructure and other things that have been done by others. So financial services as a sector, tends to step up to the table when the private sector needs to work on these type of fundamental nation building efforts. And I think that will continue. Access Bank has agreed to work with the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation to pool capital behind a super NGO driving catalytic change in Nigeria and the African continent at large. What we do as a foundation and what we believe we will influence this NGO to do is to continue to, invest in transformative ideas, in transformative individuals, and transformative institutions. Personally, my wife and I basically love to work with visionaries on the front lines of social change in Africa, particularly Nigeria. And, a digital public infrastructure vision that will transform Nigeria is exactly the kind of thing that we want to do. And so I can assure you that you've challenged us to move faster. We will. And maybe I will leave the executive vice chairman, our CEO, to have the final word from our foundation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your vision. It's very impressive, and it really raises our hopes that the digitally transformed public sector of our dreams is on its way to becoming a reality. As the chairman said, we at the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation are fully committed to supporting the DPI and all your work, because we understand the impact that it could have on the lives of all Nigerians. And I'm sure that, having listened to you now, there are a lot of other private sector organizations who would be willing to join forces with you in support of this laudable reform. I think you talked about high-level consultations. It's also important that civil society has a say in your plans. Have you thought about engaging them? Is this part of your communication agenda to talk to all the sectors, public sector, private sector, and civil society?
Yes, no, absolutely. Like I mentioned earlier, the digital economy bill, we want it to be the bill that will have the highest level of consultation in the history of Nigeria, because we think there's no nation today that can ignore digital economy. So that's why we got the support of the World Bank to ensure that this bill can go to every state in the country, every state. So yes, and some of the people we're using to get it done are actually civil society organizations. But we're opening it up. We're saying when it goes, we're probably going to go into a tech hub, or the government will provide space in every state. We invite extensively. We're working with law firms to be able to do this. This is not something that the government is even leading directly, because we want to be able to harmonize all the feedback that we will get across all the states. So the consultation is not it's not high level. It's actually, if I can use the word, grassroots. We want it to touch everyone. The reason why we're doing that is also not just because we want feedback. Just to be honest, part of the reason why we're doing it, we think consultation and engagement also help people to know the content of bills. Because most of the time we pass bills that people are not aware of. And even if they don't have any feedback to share with you, just knowing that there's now a law, that there's now regulation that will allow them to be able to do so many things within their digital economy. But also for e-government, I think is important. So it's also a means for us to enlighten Nigerians. We will release it publicly today. There will be a public way for people to give feedback. Beyond the system at the National Assembly, the ministry is driving this. We're going to engage it. We've already done a media session about 2 weeks ago where we spoke to media extensively. We will do another one, but we're also going to have industry focus sessions as well. This is why we've demanded that the National Assembly should not push the bill to be fully passed before the end of July. We think this is something that we should be looking to pass probably in October. We want to give ourselves at least minimum 2 to 3 months for deep engagement. We have a team of people that will be going across the country doing this engagement. And we're open to suggestion as well. If the foundation has community that you think we should also reach out to, the document is going to be in the public anyways. We'll take feedback. But we're more than happy to even organize special focus events where we can send our representative to speak to the bill and also take questions and feedback as well.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So this has been a very fascinating discussion. We look forward to working with you, to seeing the ideas implemented to transform public service delivery in Nigeria, and we will expedite the signing of our agreement so that we can begin to get our hands dirty as well. Thank you, Dr. Tijani, for joining us today.
Thank you, VC. We look forward to to that process being expedited because we strongly believe that there's a strong alignment with the foundation. Whilst the bill is being done, whilst the declaration is being signed, there's a lot that we should be doing right now. I personally think before the end of the year, we could easily have a data exchange system in place. We will have our web design standard in place before the end of the year. Of course, that doesn't mean these things are now being implemented, but the first step is to have them in place. Then we can now work with communities to get them implemented. And we can't wait. There's no time to waste because our people are looking up to us for improved services from government, but also from the private sector as well. These things will not just allow government to serve the people, but also allow the private sector to do a better job at serving our people as well. So we look forward to working with you, Chairman and EVC.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Tijani. Thank you for joining us. And yes, that wasn't just for the podcast. We will get on this as soon as possible. I think we're quite occupied because, of course, we have our event coming up next Monday. But after that, it will be our number one priority. I believe that my people have been talking to yours, but I'll just get them to speed things up. And I think that by the end of the first week of August, you should have documents that you can look through and we can sign. Yeah.
That'll be amazing. We look forward to that.
So the Nigerian private sector should be more supportive of this reform initiative and contribute their resources to ensuring its success. Stay tuned for more insightful discussions on transforming public service delivery in Africa. Remember to subscribe, share, and follow us on all our social media platforms and leave your feedback. Thank you once again. This has been an episode of the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation podcast. Remember to subscribe, share, and leave us a review if you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, stay inspired and remember that together we can build a brighter Africa.